Tonight, when the sun goes down, you will probably not think twice about it. You'll turn on a light. Lock a door. Check your phone. But now take all of that away. No lights. No locks. No walls. No glass between you and whatever is out there. Just darkness. Fire. Cold air. Animal sounds. And a group of people who have been moving since sunrise and need to make it safely until morning. This was not ancient metaphor. This was Tuesday. For the first Americans, night was not a transition. It was a separate world. And what they did inside that world, how they organized it, survived it, and passed it forward, is one of the most instructive things we can study about who we were. In 2021, researchers confirmed something that changed the timeline of American prehistory. At White Sands, in New Mexico, fossilized human footprints were found beside what was once an Ice Age lake. The prints were dated between 21,000 and 23,000 years old. Some were small. Children's footprints. Some were larger. Adults walking beside them. These footprints tell us one thing with certainty: people were here, crossing real landscapes, living real lives, in a world almost incomprehensible to us now. What exactly they did after dark, we reconstruct from pieces. From other sites. From materials left behind. From the logic of survival in a world without artificial light. But the footprints make it concrete. These were not abstractions. These were people with tired feet at the end of the day. And when night came, they had to deal with it. The first move was always the same: come closer. During the day, the group could spread out. Gather food. Check traps. Move between water sources. Watch the landscape. But after dark, distance became dangerous. The fire became the center. Not just because of warmth, though warmth mattered. A fire going out on a cold night was not an inconvenience. It was a threat. Fire pushed back the dark and made the world smaller. It gave the group a boundary. Something to see by. Something to orient around. A place where children could be seen. A place where faces appeared in the glow. And fire required constant attention. Someone had to feed it. Someone had to notice when the glow was weakening. Someone had to protect it from wind. Someone had to make sure the fuel nearby was dry. Meadowcroft Rock Shelter, in Pennsylvania, gives us a rare window into this. It is one of the oldest known inhabited sites in North America, with evidence of human occupation going back approximately 19,000 years. People return to this rock overhang again and again. Not because it was comfortable by modern standards. Because it worked. Sheltered from wind. Close to water. A place where fire could be maintained. A place where the group could sleep within reach of each other. A rock shelter was not luxury. It was engineering. Practical, repeated, intentional. And at night, that engineering was the difference between a manageable situation and a dangerous one. Night was not just rest. It was maintenance. A broken tool left unrepaired meant a harder day tomorrow. A dull edge meant a longer hunt. A failed binding meant a dropped catch. The fire gave light. The group was still. And hands that had been moving all day could slow down and fix what daylight had been too urgent to address. This is easy to miss when we imagine ancient life. We picture movement, the hunt, the walk, the constant search. But night stopped the movement. And in that stillness, careful work became possible. Food was processed, not just eaten. At Bonfire Shelter, in Texas, archaeologists found something that tells us a great deal about how ancient Americans organized themselves after a successful hunt. The site contains a layered deposit of bison bones, processed, associated with fire and tools, dating back over 11,700 years. These animals were not eaten carelessly. The bones were cracked for marrow. Fat was extracted. Meat was cut and divided. This kind of work happens around fire. In groups. After dark, when the day's movement has stopped and the real processing begins. Fat was not just food. It was fuel. It was insulation. It was one of the most valuable things a group could carry through a cold season. And the decision of how to use it, who gets what gets saved, what gets cooked now, was a social decision. Around that fire, the group became visible to itself. Who was tired? Who was injured? Who hadn't eaten enough? Who was still strong? Night was when the group took its own inventory. And then, the stories. This part is easy to dismiss as soft. It wasn't. Before written maps, stories carried geography. A river that became impassable after rain. A mountain pass that closed in early winter. A place where the group had once found shelter and survived. A place where someone had not. These were not tales told for entertainment, though they were that too. They were field notes stored in human memory. At Paisley Caves, in Oregon, researchers found evidence of human occupation going back approximately 14,300 years, among the oldest confirmed presences of humans in North America. People lived in those caves across generations. And the knowledge of how to use them, which passages offered shelter, which directions offered food, how to read the seasonal signs, could not be written down. It had to be said. Repeated. Tested. Corrected. Said again. Night, beside the fire, was when that transmission happened. A child sitting nearby was not being entertained. They were being uploaded. Night also changed how people looked upward. Without artificial light, the sky was not background. It was enormous. Present. Reliable in a way almost nothing else was. The moon did not just look beautiful. It tracked time. A full moon changed how far a person could safely travel after dark. A crescent meant something different for hunting. For river crossings. For decisions about when to move. The stars were not decoration. Certain patterns rose and disappeared with the seasons. They announced animal migrations. They confirmed direction across landscapes with no roads and no signs. Indigenous astronomical knowledge preserved across the Americas, recorded from peoples whose ancestors trace back to these earliest inhabitants, reflects an understanding of the night sky that did not emerge suddenly. It accumulated. Over thousands of nights. Around thousands of fires. The first Americans were not romanticizing the stars. They were reading them. And for a people with no calendar on the wall, no clock on the wrist, and no map in a pocket, the sky was the most reliable document available. Present every clear night. Consistent across generations. Free. And then, eventually, they slept. But ancient sleep may not have looked like ours. Historical records from pre-industrial Europe, centuries after the first Americans, suggest that people often slept in two separate phases, with a quiet period of wakefulness between them. We cannot project those records directly onto people living 15,000 years earlier on a different continent. But the pattern points at something important. Ancient night was probably not a single wall of unconsciousness. Someone woke to tend the fire. Someone listened to a sound and lay back down. Someone checked on a child. Someone heard something at the edge of camp and waited, still, until it passed. Sleep, in a world with real predators and real cold, was lighter than ours. More social. More interrupted. Bodies stayed close. Children stayed between adults. The sick stayed near warmth. The group, even asleep, remained oriented toward each other. Because unconscious or not, the logic was always the same. Together, they could hear danger. Together, they could keep the fire alive. Together, they could make it to morning. Night also held something we rarely associate with survival. Stillness. The sun was not demanding movement. The landscape was not pulling attention outward. For a few hours, there was only the fire. The faces around it. The sound of people breathing. Someone laughed at something. Someone held a child who couldn't sleep. Someone stared into the fire and thought about the person who was no longer with the group. Hardship and tenderness are not opposites. They have always existed in the same fire circle. So what did the first Americans do at night? They came closer. They fed the fire and protected it. They repaired what tomorrow depended on. They processed the food that next week depended on. They told the stories that the next generation depended on. They read the sky. They watched the dark. They slept in pieces, close to people they trusted. And they did something that no site, no bone deposit, no cave wall, and no set of fossilized footprints can fully capture. They remained human. Tired. Careful. Connected. Afraid of what deserved fear. Grateful for what gave warmth. Quietly waiting for morning, the way humans have always waited for morning. Not because survival required optimism. But because the fire was still burning. And that meant the group was still there. That is one field note from the oldest chapters of American history.